Yes, you noisy buggers, I hear you. But you've already been fed. So this is just showing off. Right. And hello, good evening. Nice to see you virtually. Nice to be here at all times, anytime. Just sucking air, being above ground. It's all good. It's all good. Hi, I'm Tad. I will be here for approximately the next hour, reading from The Dirty Streets of Heaven, one of my books, which is why I know nobody will sue me for reading from it. And it is Sunday morning, 1 o'clock, well, 1:01, here in California. Wherever you may happen to be in the world. I know usually for this slot we've got lots of my European friends. So welcome aboard, but also we have a few late night Americanos as well, which is always good because that's what I am. I'm a late night guy. Although I have to say, it's not so much the staying up till 2. It's because of being awake enough to do this means that I usually am up till about 5 o'clock in the morning Sunday morning, which then ripples out through the rest of the week. But for now, we're not going to worry about it. For now, we're just going to kind of groove together. One nation under a groove, as Parliament Funkadelic so aptly puts it. Anyway, so I am here. And you are here, and we are going to talk about various things. First, I'm going to show you I'm wearing my Norn Porn t-shirt because I was thinking about our dear friend Cindy Ann, who we lost, God, is it 3 years, 4 years ago now? It's hard to keep track. I know it was during COVID because when we went to see her when she was in the final stages of her illness, it was during the early stages of COVID. So I guess that would have been like 2020. Oh my Lord. Time shoots past. It is now 2025. But of course, still remember Cindy very well. We'll never forget Cindy. Good friend, but not just of Deb's and mine, but of many people associated with me and with us, including some of the people who will show up on the reading tonight, I'm sure, like Mark Gamble and various other folk from of the people that I've mentioned that helped so much with the Ostenard books. Ron and Ilva and Angela and Jeremy, all of them, of course, knew Cindy and loved her. So not to get this off on a sad note, it's just that I was wearing my Norn Porn shirt, which started out as a joke back when I was first talking about doing another Ostenard book. So this goes back to probably 2013 or so, 2014, when I finally decided to do it. And one of the things that was requested was we need Norn Porn. And it became kind of a running joke, and we eventually made t-shirts up. And this is actually, I think, Deb's t-shirt, because mine was the original and it had rhinestones and it was well fab, but I don't know where that is right now. I think we packed it away somewhere because, rhinestones, if you mess around with them too much, they can start to wear through the fabric, and it's just t-shirt fabric. So anyway, more useless information from Tad. That is my specialty. Oh my God. Ask me about pelicans sometime. No, don't ask me about pelicans. I don't need to spend any more time on extraneous subjects than necessary. So what is going on? We are still deep in the introduction of dogs. However, we are beginning to have some breakthroughs where we can have them both supervised in the same room and they are not trying to kill each other. And in fact, are doing pretty well under the circumstances. We knew this was going to take a while because of Johnny, particularly, although we didn't know what Lemon would be like. Lemon is basically, she stands up for herself, which makes things maybe a trifle more controversial sometimes than they should, at least if we wanted perfect peace. But on the other hand, we do want her to stand up for herself, and they have to. I'm having a cat riot over here, by the way. By the way, but not by the way. But of course, anybody who has dogs knows that they have to kind of set their own rules. They have very complicated hierarchies and social boundaries and things like that. And to an extent, you have to let them figure that out themselves. You can kind of try to tell them what's acceptable. But between the animals, they have to work it out for themselves to an extent. So we're just trying to get them peacefully to the point where they can hang out together, and then they will have to have their own journey of discovery as to how they're going to get along, how they're going to share resources, how they're going to be in the house together. She is young. Lemon is probably just about a year old. Still very puppy-like. She chews. She's very bouncy. She will leap up and wants to lick your face and all of that. Johnny was never particularly that way except with the people that he knows and trusts and loves, like us. Although he's perfectly fine with people. It's dogs he doesn't feel comfortable with sometimes. But if somebody comes into the house and we react to them, like in a neutral way or in a friendly way, then as far as Johnny's concerned, they're fine. So we've never had a real problem with people for Johnny, but dogs, yeah, that's an issue. So, but they are, as I said, making progress. We had them out together in the living room. Admittedly, we were both kind of sitting with them, but they were, Johnny was just walking around the living room while Lemon was sitting there, and no fighting, no nothing. Johnny doesn't want to pay a whole lot of attention to her. He kind of won't make a lot of eye contact, but he's willing to be near her. So this is a major breakthrough. And we're also having a trainer come over tomorrow, to which we set up like a week or so ago, to help us out and make sure that we're doing things right and probably come up with some suggestions for how we can help the process forward. So that's still it's lots of drama still. It's lots of drama. It's lots of shouting from room to room. We're coming out now, and all that kind of stuff. Johnny is running free at the moment. And of course, today we had some work being done in the yard that we had to have done. And so, of course, we also had to keep Johnny in all day, too, which did not add to his delight in a Saturday afternoon. So anyway, that's what's going on with that. Things are moving forward. Things are looking good so far. Fingers crossed. I'll be very pleased when we can get back to something like normality and just do what we normally do, which is mostly work. But just to be able to do that without having to constantly be chaperoning animals will be a real pleasure. I am still banging away on the Splintered Sun. I've had a few good days of work, able to get at least enough that I feel like, yes, I did write today. I did get 5, 6, 7 pages down. So it is moving forward. We're probably approaching 500 pages now. I don't set out to write longish books, and by my standards, this will not be a tremendously long book, but it will not be a brief volume either. It just kind of happens, I have a lot of characters in my brain that want to get out and jump around and do things. So anyway, that's basically what's going on with us. Deb is doing her thing when she can. She's making absolutely impressive, gorgeous, huge blanket right now for some family members. And when she can, because she also is working, but most of the time she's out in the living room doing crocheting. And while I'm locked in the back with Johnny or downstairs when I occasionally escape down here to do some work. But anyway, so we're doing fine. Everybody's fine. I hope you all are fine. or at least as fine as can be under whatever your present circumstances are. I have no complaints. Well, I have lots of complaints. I'm full of complaints, but not the kind of complaints I'm going to force you to listen to. So, all the normal stuff about my dissatisfaction with how the world is going at the moment, and my general dislike of mortality and age and all of that kind of crap that you can't do anything about. But other than that, no complaints. So hope things are more or less good for you. And let's check in very quickly and just see who has showed up. And okay, so I see Chenoa is here, and Nikki Chetwynd, Chelsea Jean Reese Robinson, excellent name. Winter, hello Winter. Tash, hello, good to see you. Rosalba, a pleasure as always. Hazel, my mother-in-law. Hi, sweetie. Loved everybody there. We are fine, except for the fact that your daughter and I can't sleep in the same room at the moment because we have to keep the dogs apart. But other than that, we're doing okay. And she's fine. She's upstairs sleeping happily with a dog. And that's the one thing about Lemon is she's a trip to sleep in the same bed with. And I kind of wish we hadn't started that. I wished we had started her right away and sleeping in her crate or something. But, we were concerned about her feeling at home and welcomed and cared for. And as a result, she now has somebody to sleep with her every night. It's been Deb generally, but we've all taken turns. Anyway, so hello. Hi, sweetie. How are you doing? Give my love to everybody on your end. We're all doing okay here. Ivan, my good friend. Good to see you, buddy. And there's Chris Fobb. Hello, hello. Nice to see you too. Petra, hello and welcome. Suzanne, who else? Oh, that's Suzanne Owen, by the way. Jeremy, hello. Sandra, good to see you. Wouter, Maria Jose, Jan Mühlenweg. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Iris, good to see you. And 9 more, it says. So I know one of them at least is Kristen, who has signed here. But the others will be a mystery for a while. But I don't know if that's 9 more people who have commented or 9 more people who have just are on. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Everybody is welcome. Everybody is appreciated. It's all good. So, with all of that said, with the update on dogs and books, as I said, the cats were rioting. They now appear to have quieted down, so maybe I can actually get some reading done. Anything else to comment on? Just, no, it's just life. I'm just doing my best to stay sane, which is not always an easy struggle, but I'm hanging in. I'm hanging in so far, and I hope you are too. Okay, so let us get back to the dirty streets of heaven. And what was happening when we, hang on, let me go back and find it because I actually skipped past it to see what was going to be on the menu tonight. So what has happened is that Bobby has been called to heaven, and he has been called in front of an E48, E-P-H-O-R-A-T-E, an E48. And the E4s are 5 high-ranking angels. And so Bobby is there with his essentially supervisor, Temuel, and 5 high-ranking angels who are quizzing him about various things he's been doing. And of course, he's already a bit worried about the situation that he's wound up in with the missing souls and the dead prosecutor, not just dead in the normal mortal world, but dead in the eternal world of heaven versus hell as well, in a particularly dreadful way. So that was what was going on in this particular thing, and we were in media res, as we say. We were in the middle of the scene when we had to stop last time because we had gone past the top of the hour. So I am going to continue with Bobby and the E48 and then on from there. So that's where we is. I I was confused, masters, I said. That's the only defense I can offer. That's the only defense I can offer. Caught up in time and earthly things, I judged that there would be a better moment to share everything with heaven, as we're doing now. It was lame, but it was all I could come up with, and at least there was a little truth to it. If I've disappointed or sinned against the highest, I beg pardon. It is presumptuous to think that you might disappoint he who made you, said Carael. Did the whore of hell say anything else to you, this Countess of Cold Hands? He spoke her name with such withering distaste, I had no doubt that if she stood helpless before him, he would have blasted her to cinders without an instant's hesitation. Are you certain you have told us everything? Carael scared me. Just by standing there, so bold and beautiful, he made me feel like a miserable, dirty little sinner, and at the moment, I couldn't imagine telling him anything but the truth. I have, master. Did I do wrong? A pause fell over the gathering. I could dimly sense currents of thought running between the five of them, but it was communication far too lofty and swift for me to understand. Chamuel broke the silence. Archangel Temuel, what have you to say? After all, Deloriel is your charge. Chamuel hadn't spoken much more than Raziel. His inner fires were banked low, at least to my senses, but he gave the impression of depth and solemnity. To gaze on his heavenly form was to sense something vast and awesome lurking just out of sight. The mule took a moment to compose his thoughts, or at least that's what I hoped he was doing, since it was also possible my personal archangel was getting ready to throw me under the bus. I am honored the holy Ephorate desires my opinion, he said at last. Deloriel's tradecraft is good. It is true that he can be one of the more headstrong spirits, but as you know, that is often the case with heaven's servants who exist in time on the plane of earthly existence. And as we all know, there are occasions when such traits are useful. A more composed spirit might have succumbed to the hunting demon. A more composed spirit might not have been pursued in the first place, pointed out Terentia. A touch unfairly, I thought, but of course I didn't say so. Then perhaps it is time we gathered Deloriel back into the heart of the fold, said Anaita. Perhaps it would be a kindness to let him return to the celestial city and exult in the closeness of the highest, as we all do. For a moment, listening to her sweet Bo-Peep voice, I really wanted that, despite everything that makes me who I am. Yes, I thought, bring me back to heaven for good. Let me live here and sink into the glow and the warmth and the certainty. No more questions, no more responsibilities, no more fear of failing a needy soul. It truly seemed the nicest thing that could happen. Only for that moment, though. Then I got over it. I said, "You're too kind, mistress." But suddenly it all seemed different again, and I wanted nothing else in all of creation except to get out of that ineffably beautiful, blissful place and back to stinking, dangerous, unpredictable Earth. Because that was where my work was, not up here in the shining streets and tranquil gardens of paradise. Perhaps the Ephorate sensed my thought in some way. All five went quiet, and the fire of their beings grew lower, or seemed to, which I guess meant they had turned away from me to speak among themselves once more. I looked over to Temuel, but he too had retreated into himself, his essential light turned down as if it had a rheostat. It seemed like I waited a very long time in that timeless place before anyone spoke again. Go back, Deloriel, and do what the highest has given you to do, said the crystalline blaze of hope and solace that was Terentia. Relief washed through me. Something a little less vivid than joy, but still very real. Know, however, that your fitness for that task has been questioned. and that our judgment is not yet complete. Walk with caution. God loves you. I bowed my head as the 5 angels reached out and touched me, one after another, little bursts of joyful fire, and then they were gone, as was the enactoron itself. Temuel and I abruptly found ourselves in the middle of the great thoroughfare known as the Singing Way, with the sweetly murmuring crowds of heaven eddying around us like phantoms of light and fog. "You've had a close brush, Deloriel," Temuel said. "I don't think a second gathering of ephors will be so lenient, so try to fly a little closer to the ground from now on, will you?" I didn't really have anything to say to that, but I mumbled some promise. Now that the danger of my personal disillusion was over, at least for the present, I was even more unnerved to realize how close to it I had been. "One thing," Temuel said. "I didn't hear everything that passed between you and the Ephorate. Did they ask you about the Magians? Or about the name Kephas?" Both of these were completely new to me, and I wondered if Temuel was taking the good cop role in some complicated process, working on me after the council had softened me up. "Never heard of either of them," I told him, truthfully. "Ah," he said, "no matter. Just some speculation of my own. You may disregard it." This was making me extremely nervous. What's this all about, and why are they picking on me? I didn't do anything to cause any of this. Temuel's light warmed to soothing sunrise pinks and yellows, the archangelic version of someone putting a comradely hand on your shoulder. "No, Deloriel, but sometimes when things go very wrong, and even the highest are frightened, innocence is not enough for salvation." I let this cryptic phrase echo for a moment. I was feeling a chill again, and now I really did want to get away as quickly as possible, to escape the place that every living soul on earth wanted to reach. Are they really that frightened up here? Just because one soul wasn't where it was supposed to be? For a moment, the mule's pearly light guttered like a flame in a high wind. It took me a moment to realize he was surprised. "Of course," he said. "You don't know, do you?" Don't know what?" He spoke slowly, like a grown-up breaking bad news to a child. "The soul known on earth as Edward Walker was only the first to vanish, Deloriel. Others have gone missing since then. More than a few." His voice sank to a conspiratorial whisper. "So, yes, they really are that frightened up here." Chapter 11. Foxy Foxy. "Cariel? Cariel, General of the Glittering Host? That Cariel? Wow, he's a heavy hitter." Sam sounded impressed. "You really got the treatment." "Yeah, even I've heard of him," said Clarence. The two of them were helping me clean up the wreckage of my apartment and pack it up for storage. Not that I had a lot worth keeping, especially after the place had been ransacked. I'd lived there for a couple of years, and a lot of people knew it. It had been the first place the Gallu went looking for me, which meant I was going to have to stay away from it for a while. "Everybody knows Cariel, kid." Sam took a swig of his ginger ale. I'm not surprised they brought in someone like him, though. If that Walker guy was only the first, if other souls are going AWOL, well, shit, no wonder they're panicking up at the house. I hadn't said anything about the other two names Temuel had floated. First, because I didn't trust the kid. Second, because I wanted to check into them myself before muddying the waters. I'd tell Sam when I had a chance. Meanwhile, Sam kicked at a bunch of scattered hot rod magazines that someone had dumped on the floor while searching the apartment. "You're not really keeping all this, are you, B? What are you planning to do, open a museum of crap someday?" I ignored that and gathered up the magazines. "Sam, wasn't exactly Mr. House Beautiful himself. He lived in the seedier section of Southport. You could barely see his living room carpet under all the newspapers and pizza boxes, and his bathroom towels had sweat stains on them. But I still don't know why someone would send a monster like that after me, I said. Look at this place. They were searching for something, and it wasn't just that hell beast in here either. Clarence looked up from where he was picking up tableware that had been scattered across the linoleum. I suppose I should have asked him to put it in the sink to be washed after being hell-handled, but I hardly ever use any of it except to stir coffee and butter toast anyway. What do you mean, Bobby? The kid asked. What do I mean? Look, this place is a mess, sure, but a galu is a spirit of elemental disaster, the size of a small car and hot as the inside of a crematory oven. It pursues, it captures, it kills. You don't summon one of those and tell it, oh, and take a look in the guy's kitchen cabinets while you're there. That's like asking a grizzly bear to audit my tax records. You don't pay any taxes, Sam pointed out. Shut up, I acknowledged. You understand, Junior, they want to catch me or kill me, but they also think I know something. Or that I have something they want. Clarence suddenly looked a bit nervous. You think they'll come back? If I stayed here, probably guaranteed. Which is why... I don't know what's going on over there. Somebody's dragging something around the floor. If I stayed here, probably guaranteed, which is why I'm going to be kicking it in some rent-by-the-hour motel tonight and then some different but equally charming spot tomorrow night. Trust me, he's slept worse places, Sam said. Yeah, thanks for making me look good in front of the kid. With the boxes loaded into my car, the apartment looked sad and almost tidy. Let's go down the block, I said. I'll buy you boys some lunch before the phone rings and one of us has to go off and mess around with dead people again. Sam got a call to a client in Spanish Town as we were finishing, and Clarence went with him, so I walked back to my car alone. I put my jacket on because the thin February sunshine wasn't enough to keep me comfortable. I wished the spring would hurry up and arrive. It's funny, but even regular trips to the permanently glorious weather of heaven doesn't change the pure pleasure of walking out your door one day and finding that warm days have arrived, that suddenly wearing a jacket makes you too hot. I kept my eyes open as I went through Hoover Park, although I was nearly certain that the demonic beast someone had sicked on me was strictly a nighttime diversion. I told you how much energy it takes to sustain something so scary and unusual, right? It's a factor of 10 more difficult to make one of those manifest in full daylight. Still, something a bit more civilized than the galu had tossed my apartment, and the horned monstrosity probably hadn't done anything as delicate as stringing up grass wax by his own nerve fibers either, so I tried not to let myself be distracted by the heedless civilians all around me. I saw the guy waiting out in front of my building from almost a block away, which gave me plenty of time to clock him as I approached. My car was parked farther down the street, and there was a chance I could have got into it without a confrontation, but he didn't look too intimidating. He was fairly tall, but pale and thin. Really thin. That was one of the first things I noticed. He looked like a middle school kid wearing his dad's suit. He didn't stand still either, but jittered and dance-stepped in place, apparently not the least self-conscious, although as I watched, a woman with a stroller and an old man with a bag of groceries both gave him a wide berth. And his skin was so completely white, bloodlessly white, that for a moment I had the chilling illusion his dark, baggy suit might be what he'd been buried in. It wasn't worth the trouble to try to slip past him to my car, and in fact I was a bit curious, so I kept walking toward him. When he finally heard me, he spun all the way around to look at me, and I realized that he was alive, but more than just ordinarily pale. He was some kind of albino, although his eyes were tawny, not the more common pink. To put an interesting twist on it, he wasn't just albino, but Asian too, a combination you don't see that often, even in cosmopolitan San Judas. More importantly, though, from his first words, it seemed clear that my unpigmented Asian American friend was not entirely sane. "Dollar, Bob?" he said in a chirpy voice. "Mr. Bobby D? Dollar man?" He stopped bouncing for a moment and frowned, his whole face creasing into a sock puppet of the mask of tragedy. "Or am I wrong again? So many people have said no today. No, not dollar." "Who the hell are you?" My choice of words wasn't entirely random. He did have something of the look of the opposition, but that might just have been his skin condition. "Don't know me? Everybody knows me. All over downtown." He giggled and did another little soft shoe shuffle. "Well, I don't, and I don't want to either." But he didn't have the smell of serious danger on him, at least as far as I could tell. Still, I kept my hand in my jacket pocket, where my .38 was hiding. His eyes got big. As I said, the irises were sort of yellow-brown. The irises were vertical, like a cat's or a fox's eyes. Whatever he was definitely in the other category. "Oh, but I know you, Mr. Bobby Dollar," he exclaimed. "And I think you have something you might want to sell. I know lots of people who want to buy. I can arrange. Good business, huh? Good for everyone." "I don't have anything to sell." Was this guy with the no-mask face some kind of lost spirit who'd seen me and Sammy and the kid cleaning broken furniture out of the house and now was hoping to scam a few bucks? The creatures that fall through the cracks in the great war between us and them often wind up homeless, and with his two-roomy suit and his loopy dialogue, this pale fellow certainly could have been one of those, but there was something about him that wouldn't let me dismiss him so easily. Really truthful, true?" The albino leaned way down and then squinted up at me from below. "No little something you might have found? No pretty shiny? A little flippy-flappy something that needs a special helper to find a market?" I had no idea what he was talking about, and his presence was beginning to depress me. It was bad enough that the bad guys knew my apartment. Was every fairy tale gutter rat and Judas going to come hang out there too? Plus, there was just something about the guy that creeped me out. Then all of a sudden it occurred to me that the folks who had tossed my apartment thought I knew something or had something they wanted, and this guy thought I might be trying to sell something. "Just out of curiosity, pal," I said, "how much do you think you could get for what did you call it? A pretty shiny? I mean, if someone knew where to find such a thing." "Oh, he would be a very rich man. Yes, indeed." "But how do I know we're even talking about the same thing?" I was trying to find a way to get him to identify whatever he was looking for without admitting that I didn't have it and didn't know what it was. "We need to be a little more specific." He laughed, as if genuinely pleased by what I'd said, and threw his scarecrow arms in the air, sleeves flapping. "If you have it, Mr. B. Doll, I know people who want it. Don't need to say more than that." He spun. Jazz hands. I wanted to pop him one just to get him to stand still. "Look, I don't have time to mess around. I don't know you, and I don't do business with people I don't know." He laughed again. "Okay, Bobby, you the boss. But if you change your mind and want to talk about the shiny, talk for real. Just ask around. Any corner downtown. I'll find out. Fox, that's me." "Fox? Or Foxy Boy?" "Mr. Fox. Foxy. They are all me, and they all know me." He grinned hugely, and I noticed that at least a couple of his upper teeth were gold. An instant later, he had whirled away from me and was strutting off. making his way up Stambaugh in the general direction of Main Street like the drum major of the Hiroshima Ghost Parade. Wait! How do I get in touch with you if I do want to talk? Ask for me on any corner downtown. A couple of old black guys sitting on the front step of the apartment building next door laughed and pointed as they watched him prance past. So, yet one more weird detail to add to a large, dangerous, and very confusing picture. I had been thinking I would check my mailbox one last time before I left, but after meeting Fox, I didn't feel like going back inside the building. Not that it would have mattered. I never get anything but junk mail anyway. I hopped in the car and went hunting for any sanctuary with cable TV and a working ice machine. I picked a place on the Camino Real because it had a parking garage. After all, a 71 Matador with a full performance package isn't the most discreet car in the world. In fact, I haven't even seen another one around Jude with the same copper paint, let alone my checkerboard interior, so no way could I leave it out in plain view. In fact, I would have to think about ditching it entirely until the heat had blown over. My phone continued to oblige me by not ringing, so I settled back to catch up on a few details that had been hanging fire the last couple of days. Fatback's material on the late Grasswax, the real Grasswax, not his earthly Gratzuvach identity, was interesting. I skimmed it and put it aside to read later when I had less to do, but the main thing I noticed was that he'd been around longer than most prosecutors of his rank. The material on Edward Lyons Walker was more of the stuff I'd already seen. Born in 1928, started first successful company in his San Judas garage in the early 1950s, riches and fame, blah, blah, split and founded Holotech when another company he had started got too corporate, blah, blah, space program, contributed lots of money to ecological causes. All this biographical crap reminded me I still hadn't looked through the pictures I'd taken at the Walker house the afternoon young Garcia Windhover had threatened to bust a cap in my ass. The images were still on my phone, which had somehow managed to survive in my pocket while I was being tossed around by a horned red-hot, what do you call it? There were a couple of blurry shots of the Walker living room and one of Posey's shoulder and a part of the Mayan calendar, but most of the pictures were of the bookcases. I enlarged the images as much as I could and read down the spines of the books, Googling when I couldn't get enough information from title and author alone. The late ELW's collection was pretty much what I would have expected from the rest of the house. Lots of coffee table art books and big expensive picture books about science, as well as collections of photography of the West, echoing the Ansel Adams prints on the living room walls. Among the ordinary-sized books, science and the arts seemed to dominate, although there were a few novels, some of them science fiction, like Carl Sagan's Contact, others more mainstream stuff like Updike and John Irving. There was even a section of mysteries, the English village sort. I wondered if those had been his or his late wife's. After what his granddaughter had told me, I wasn't surprised to see that Walker had no conventional religious books, although there were several volumes by Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, and even a hoary old copy of Bertrand Russell's Why I Am Not a Christian. Altogether, Walker had over a dozen titles with a pretty clearly anti-religious slant. Still, for a scientist, that wasn't much of a surprise. Stubborn bastards, those scientists. I was beginning to wish I'd found Walker's music collection and taken pictures of that instead. You show me what someone listens to, I'll tell you everything you want to know about his soul. For instance, a bunch of Nickelback albums would have indicated he never had one in the first place. As I mentioned, I wasn't quite sure what I was looking for on the bookshelves. I didn't really expect to find anything titled Evading Heaven or How to Make Your Soul Disappear. I was mainly trying to get a feeling for Edward Lyons Walker beyond the dry facts that Fatback and the ordinary internet had already provided. Something that might help me get a handle on why, of all the deaths in the world, his had been so different. But judging by his books, at least, Walker was pretty much like millions of others who had managed to show up for their own afterlives. I had all but given up when something caught my eye. I had enlarged a section of magazine-shaped objects that filled most of a shelf. Some of them were magazines, special year-end editions of things like Chemical and Engineering News, but most were stockholders' reports for HT and some of the other companies in which Walker had been involved. Some of these dated from several years earlier, and the section in general looked like Walker might have stuck things into it, but almost never pulled anything back out. But squeezed in, right between reports for Littleton Bioscience and Metaware, was a slender prospectus or something similar with the words "The Magian Society" printed on its spine in tasteful italics. Alarm bells, hell, air raid sirens went off in my head. Because I had just heard about Magians, and not from just anyone either. Somebody had asked me if I had heard anything about Magians. An archangelic somebody named Temuel, my supervisor. I did a quick, fruitless online search for Magians. I found a lot of jabber about the 3 wise kings, but nothing about any society. So I phoned the Walker house. Posy Walker picked up about the 20th ring, just when I had resigned myself to the answering machine. "Hello?" She sounded a trifle baked again. I introduced myself, and she eventually remembered me. "Right, that writer guy." "Exactly. Listen, I was curious about your grandfather's interest in the Magian Society." I said it like everybody knew who that was, although I had already discovered nobody on the internet seemed to have heard of them. "Never heard of him," she said, on cue. "That's okay. I noticed he had something of theirs when I was there, a folder. Maybe you could find it for me." I gave her the bookshelf coordinates, which was a bit like trying to teach a marmoset to play chess. I doubted that she'd spend a lot of time perusing her grandfather's books. I told her I was happy to wait. She came back a few minutes later. "No, there's nothing like that." I stifled a curse. "Did you look carefully, Ms. Walker? Between Linson Yeah, just like you said. It was there, probably, because there's a space, but it's not there now." She trailed off, considering. "Maybe one of the cleaners took it?" "Oh, yeah. The Mighty Maids just happened to borrow the one thing in the entire bookshelf I wanted to see and take it back to their office for special cleaning." "Look, could I drop by sometime and take a look around sometime soon? Just in case it's been, I don't know, misplaced or something. It would really help my article if I could find it." Somebody yelled at something in the background on her end. It sounded like Garcia, the gangbanger. "I guess," she said. "Sure. But not now. Somebody's over. Later." She hung up without waiting to hear my reply. Despite a powerful urge to drive over there right now and break in and look for myself, I decided not to. If it hadn't been stolen from the shelf, it was just misplaced, which meant it would still be there tomorrow, but breaking and entering the Walker place tonight might have dire consequences. Like, I might accidentally walk in on Posy and her idiot boyfriend having sex. It was a nice enough evening, and I would have loved to swing by the Compasses for a drink and some comradely bullshit, but it had only been 24 hours since the attack, and I wasn't going anywhere that my pursuer might be watching. Also, to be honest, I wasn't really in a hurry to see Monica either. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't that I wanted to avoid her. I just wanted to avoid having a conversation with her. I hadn't had time to figure out what falling into bed with Monica the other night was going to mean. Also, when I had been having the occasional moment of arousing thought, it wasn't about Monica, but a certain stunning blonde hell creature, and that was even more confusing. But I wouldn't want you to think I was a complete moral coward. So I would like to make clear that the main reason for not going to the compasses was as follows: not wanting to suffer horrible, painful attack of the murderous demon variety. I had emailed Fatback to see if he could find me anything about the Magian Society or the name Kephas, Kephas, but I hadn't heard anything from him yet because midnight was still hours away. I was getting hungry, so I walked from the motel to a Mexican place I had spotted on a side street. Considering it wasn't anywhere near the worst part of Jude, I felt surprisingly unsafe. Every movement at the edge of my immediate frame of vision yanked my head around, and sudden noises didn't do much for my nerves either. It wasn't just the thought of getting attacked by the Galu that had me worried either. If I was now a hot commodity, that meant other people were probably willing to shop me for profit, even if they didn't have anything personal against me. So suddenly it wasn't just 8-foot demons I needed to keep an eye out for, but anyone who might be looking at me funny. On the streets of San Judas, that can tire you out real fast. I made it to the restaurant without incident, and to my pleasant surprise, it turned out they made carnitas that actually tasted like something you might get in Mexico. And I mean that in the best possible way. It looked like the kind of establishment where they'd have a DJ on weekends, but on a weeknight it was almost deserted and quiet enough to think. As I ate, I knocked back a couple of Negra Modelos and looked over the research material. I discovered some interesting things about the late Edward Walker I hadn't known, including the fact he was a member of American Atheists and had even spoken at a few of their conventions. It still didn't get me any closer what happened, of course. As far as heaven is concerned, an atheist's soul is just like any other nut bars. If they lived a decent life, we take them. I also did a little more searching for Magians online. Turns out the term doesn't just mean the guys out of the We Three Kings song, but also covers Zoroastrian priests from Persia. Either way, though, it seemed to have too much to do with religion to interest someone like Walker. Could the name Magians have some other meaning, I wondered? Alchemical or something? Could it be some kind of fraternal organization of scientists? I Googled as I worked my way through dinner, but didn't turn up anything. Somewhere, during my second beer, I looked up and noticed that a guy sitting at the bar was watching me, but he glanced away when he saw me looking back. He appeared to be an ordinary working guy in work boots and a trucker cap, probably Mexican or Central American by ancestry. At any other time, I would have figured he'd just been looking me over out of idle curiosity. But tonight, I was thinking about things differently. I caught him staring again a couple of minutes later and gave him a hard glance in return. He dropped his eyes quickly, but I could see a tiny sheen of sweat on his neck. He didn't look like someone who thought I was kind of cute. He looked like someone who'd recognized me, and that probably didn't mean anything good. That's the downside of having friends in odd places. Other people who hang out in those odd places start to recognize you. If I stayed long enough, I felt pretty sure he'd find an excuse to step outside and call someone. So I beat him to the punch, finishing my beer with a long swallow and leaving my money on the table. As I headed for the door, I swung wide to the bar and caught the guy by surprise. As he stared up at me, I leaned toward him and whispered, "If anyone's coming after me, they better come hard and strong. Got me? Duro y fuerte, porque yo soy un ángel de Dios." I left him staring, his mouth hanging open. I had either given one of hell's helpers fair warning or scared the crap out of some guy who developed a little crush on a stranger. I walked back with my eyes wide open, just in case he'd informed someone of my whereabouts before I noticed him, but I got back without incident. As I reached the hotel, my phone rang. "Is this Mr. Dollar, yo? It's G-Man, remember?" G-Man, as in Garcia? As in, I took away your piece and wrapped your skull with it? Yeah, I remember you, chummy. What do you want? He sounded like he'd really psyched himself up for this. You said maybe I could give my strap back?" Gun, Garcia. A Palo Alto kid can't call it a strap without sounding like a total douche. You got some information for me? Now he just sounded hurt. Yeah, okay, sorry. If I tell you something, can I get my gun back? I don't know. What do you want to tell me? Well, Posey, I was talking to Posey. She's my girlfriend, right? And she said when you came over, you were interested in some African guy her grandfather knew? Yeah, I am. Although this Magian thing was what really had my interest now. So, did you find out his name? Sort of. But even better, man, he was here. What? Well, what are you talking about? Where? Here at Posey's house. I mean her granddad's house. That African guy was here. She didn't know he was coming or anything. He just showed up. He hung around for a long time talking to Posey and stuff. She made him tea even. He was here when you called. Anyway, he just left a few minutes ago. He was there when I called. It was very difficult not to shout, but I was on a public street. And you waited until now to tell me? I had a sudden, very strong suspicion about why this African gentleman might have dropped by, and also why Posey hadn't been able to find the folder. Jesus, why did you wait so long? Hey, man, I didn't want to give anything away, like that you were looking for it. I know all about this private detective shit, yo, so I waited until he left. God save me. I headed for the stairs down to the motel garage. Stay there, both of you. I'll be right over. Well, do I get my piece back? Oh, I'm going to give it to you all right. Same way I did last time. I'm going to smack your dumbass head with it. I hung up on him and climbed into my car. Chapter 12, Black Windows. As I hurried toward the Palo Alto district, I thought about all the questions I still didn't have answers for. I needed to know more about the Magians, for one thing, a lot more than I could find on my own, but it was hours too early to call Fatback, unless I just wanted to listen to him grunt and squeal. I've already got plenty of friends who can do that for me, especially if I catch them before they've had coffee. Still, things were moving fast enough that I was beginning to think I needed to go visit one of my other sources. Fatback was very good at what he did, so he was usually my first choice, but there were others in and around San Judas with a different and maybe deeper insight into what went on in the opposition camp. The Broken Boy and the Solihull sisters sprang to mind, but the Broken Boy was expensive and hard to work with at the best of times. He had problems that made my new friend Foxy seem together as the head of the local Rotary Club. So I decided I'd give the sisters a try first. Not now, though. Now I was back on University Avenue again, turning onto Walker's quiet, expensive side street. I was beginning to get sick of the smell of stately old trees and trimmed hedges. Wow, said Posey, opening the door. She was wearing a baggy caftan, the kind of thing hippie chicks used as sleepwear back in 1973. Posey had clearly missed her natural era. She really did call you. I didn't know you and G even knew each other. Yeah, we're practically white soul brothers. I understand the African gentleman you mentioned before dropped in for a visit tonight. She nodded as she led me down the hall toward the living room. He just showed up. He's nice. I never really talked to him before. What did he want? Oh, he wanted to thank us for a contribution my grandpa made to his charity. They're building some kind of school or hospital or something. She flapped her hand. I didn't really catch all of it. G was tiptoeing around like Super Spy Squad. It was really distracting. Shut up, said Garcia, appearing from the kitchen with a box of Cheez-Its in his hands and crumbs in his little chin beard. I was helping Mr. Dollar, right? I was, wasn't I? A little more help like this, and I'd be demoted to appearing to nuns in visions. Did your visitor say anything else, Ms. Walker? Did he leave any literature? Anything? What was his name? There was a chance the guy was perfectly legitimate. I never had anything on him in the first place, except that Posey remembered him coming to visit her grandfather. But his timing was a little suspicious, showing up the same night I found out the Magian Society folder was gone. Mubari or Nabari or something, said Posey. Something weird. With all due respect, you're killing me here, I said. Did he give you a card or something else that might have a name, an address, anything? Not this time. I think G scared him. He kept asking the poor guy all these stupid questions. They weren't stupid. Garcia was full of righteous indignation. I just asked him what his deal was. I winced. If the poor guy was legit, he couldn't have enjoyed that. If he wasn't, well, let's just say he was now definitely aware he was under suspicion. Hold on. Slow down. Ms. Walker, a second ago you said, not this time. Does that mean he gave you a card or something another time he was here? I think so, yeah. I did my best to remain calm. Any possibility it's still around, that you could find it? It might be in the crud drawer. That's where the rubber bands from the newspaper and like twist ties and all the useless stuff like that goes. She smiled beatifically, as if this breakthrough in domestic order was hers and hers alone. I smiled back as charmingly as I could manage. Any chance you could go see if it's there, Ms. Walker? Because if this guy was a ringer, he obviously wouldn't have left anything tonight. He had probably just come to vacuum up the Magian Society folder and any other loose ends, and he wouldn't be coming back either. It would really help my article on your granddad. 2 minutes later, after a great deal of rummaging noises and mumbled curses, Posey Walker reappeared in triumph, waving a white cardboard rectangle. Found it! I tried not to look too eager as I reached out for it. G-Man was watching me with a kind of hero-worshipping attention that I knew was going to cause trouble somewhere up the line. The card itself was simple, just a few lines in the same neat black italics as the folder I'd photographed. The Reverend Dr. Moses Habari, the Magian Society, 4442 East Charleston Road, Suite D, San Judas, California, 94043. There was a phone number, too, which I immediately dialed. No longer in service, of course. How long ago did you say he left? About half an hour, Garcia informed me. You gonna go after him? Can I tag? I briefly considered telling him my real feelings, but decided I might need something from him or Posey later on. No, I need you to stay here in case he gets in touch again. And if he does, please don't do anything weird. I gave him my sternest look. Just call me. Understand? Discreetly. Under control, Mr. Dollar. He all but saluted. A couple of days ago, he had been waving a gun in my face. Now this dumbass was ready to follow me around like a baby duck. I don't know. Sometimes I think I'm an idiot magnet. I was back on the Bay Shore a few minutes later, this time heading towards Southport. I knew East Charleston Road fairly well because it wasn't that far from where Sam lived, a neighborhood that had fallen on tough times twice, first in the 70s when the cargo handling industry took a hit from competition across the bay, then again 20 years later when Shoreline Amusement Park closed for good. What remained were little business parks, storage lockers, and party supply warehouses, as well as a few apartment buildings and stores catering to a local population of retired longshoremen, general rummies, and of course the occasional angel. As I made my way down Charleston toward the bay, I could see the skeletal remains of Shoreline Park off to my right, the great fretwork arch of the whirl-away coaster draped across the face of the waxing moon like a spider web. People were always coming up with new projects that were going to turn the little man-made island back into a dynamo of the local economy. Hotels, office complexes, even one plan for a mid-bay golf course. But somehow they all came to nothing, and the abandoned amusement park just kept getting rustier and more decrepit. Nowadays, it mainly got used as a location for low-budget zombie apocalypse movies. And that's where I'm going to stop, because we're in the middle of a chapter that goes on for a while, and there's all kinds of exciting things that happen. Well, a few exciting things that happen. But the main thing is it is now 2 o'clock in the morning here in California. And with that, I am going to wrap it up for the night. So just let me check one thing quickly. Poor old Nickel Who, says Tash. Anyway, I know it's kind of piling on, but you know, it was many years ago when I wrote this now. It's been many years since I wrote this, so I probably wouldn't be piling on Nickelback these days. Although I have to say, when I looked at the Bobby Dollar books, which were written back in the early 2000s, long before he ran for president, a lot of Trump jokes about how awful Trump was. So I had a brief political moment here. I had an argument online a few different times with people who went, "You only dislike Trump because you're a Democrat." And I went, "I've disliked Trump since he was a Democrat." I've disliked the man since the 1980s. Anyway, but as I said, I will try to avoid politics. So with that, I say thank you so much for joining me. It's been a great pleasure, as always, to spend time with you, even virtually. I hope you've had a good time, too. I hope you will take very good care of yourselves and your loved ones and your family and close friends and all that. But I also hope that you will, when you can, that you will do a little for other folks you see around you who might need a little help, whether that's a couple of bucks to somebody down on their luck or just a smile or a kind word. And that's the only thing I can really recommend. That that's my version of just trying to go through life, is just try to help out a little bit when you can. It's a good thing to do, not for your own sake, but just because humanity does better when we all try to do a little for each other. So with that, I say thank you, and be well, and peace. And I will see you all, well, some of you I will see at 7 p.m. tonight. But the rest of you I probably will see next week. And until then, have a good week, and I'll talk to you soon.